The gunshot echoed through the canyon like thunder, startling Peyton Nolan from her daydream as she peered out the window of her small homestead on the outskirts of Presidio, Texas. It wasn't unusual to hear gunfire in 1875, but something about this particular shot sent a chill down her spine, as if it were an omen of the troubles to come. Peyton's gaze drifted to her wedding ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the late afternoon sunlight. It was the only thing of real value she owned, a reminder of happier days before Thomas had changed, before the liquor and gambling had taken hold of him. 4 years of marriage had slowly transformed the charming man she'd fallen for into someone she barely recognized. Thomas should have been back by now, she murmured to herself, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Their small cattle ranch was failing, and Thomas had ridden into town that morning with their last 2 calves, promising to return with enough money to keep them afloat another month. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention, but it wasn't her husband's familiar gait. A lone rider approached, tall in the saddle, his silhouette cutting a striking figure against the setting sun. As he drew closer, Peyton recognized Deacon Porter, owner of the neighboring ranch. He tipped his hat as he dismounted, his expression grim beneath his sun-weathered features. "Afternoon, Mrs. Nolan," he said, his deep voice carrying a weight that made Peyton's heart sink. "Mr. Porter," she replied with a nod. "What brings you all the way out here? Is something wrong?" Deacon shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting on the hitching post. "I thought you should know. I was in town today at Reese's General Store." Peyton's fingers instinctively went to her wedding ring, twisting it anxiously. "And I saw Thomas there. He wasn't selling cattle." Deacon's blue eyes met hers with reluctance. "He was selling your wedding ring, madam." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment as Peyton glanced down at her hand in confusion. "That's impossible. My ring is right here." Deacon shook his head. "He had a ring that looked just like yours. Said it belonged to his wife, that she wouldn't miss it." He cleared his throat. "He said you had another, a family heirloom that you preferred." Peyton's hand flew to her mouth as realization dawned. The family heirloom, her grandmother's ring, had been stolen from their home the previous week. Thomas had helped her search for it, consoling her when they couldn't find it. Now she understood why. "He sold both of them," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Nolan. I wouldn't have said anything, but—" Deacon paused, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "I know things haven't been easy for you two, and a man who'd sell his wife's wedding rings isn't a man who's thinking straight." Peyton sank onto the porch steps, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. Not only had Thomas stolen her grandmother's ring, but he'd also crafted a clever lie to sell a replica of her wedding band, knowing she'd never willingly part with either. "Did he say what he needed the money for?" she asked quietly. Deacon's expression hardened. "Overheard him telling Barton he had a big game tonight, said it was his chance to win back everything he'd lost. More gambling. Of course, the little money they had left was never enough for Thomas's growing addiction." "Thank you for telling me, Mr. Porter," Peyton said, standing and squaring her shoulders despite the pain tearing at her heart. Deacon hesitated, studying her face. "Mrs. Nolan, Peyton, if you need anything, my ranch is just over the ridge. It's not right what he's doing to you." Something in his eyes, concern, kindness, perhaps something more, made Peyton's breath catch. She'd known Deacon Porter for 3 years, ever since he'd bought the neighboring property. He'd always been polite, distant even, but she'd noticed the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. "I'll be fine," she assured him, though they both knew it was a lie. "Thomas will come to his senses eventually." Deacon nodded, unconvinced, and mounted his horse. "Just remember what I said. Day or night, if you need help, you come to me." As she watched him ride away, Peyton couldn't help wondering what life might have been like if she'd met Deacon Porter before Thomas Nolan. But such thoughts were dangerous for a married woman, no matter how troubled her marriage had become. Inside the cabin, Peyton moved mechanically, preparing a simple supper of beans and cornbread that Thomas would likely miss. Her mind raced with painful questions. How long had he been planning this? How many other lies had she believed? The sound of an approaching wagon jolted her from her thoughts. Thomas. He was singing loudly, off-key, a sure sign he'd been drinking. Peyton steeled herself, unsure whether to confront him or pretend she knew nothing. Thomas stumbled through the door, his face flushed. "Peyton, my beautiful wife," he declared, sweeping her into an awkward embrace that reeked of whiskey. "You're drunk," she stated flatly, pulling away. "Just celebrating a bit," he slurred, dropping into a chair at their small table. "Sold those calves for a good price. Things are looking up." The lie stung worse than she'd expected. "Is that so? And where's the money from this miraculous sale?" Thomas's smile faltered. "Had to pay off some debts in town, but don't you worry, I've got a plan to multiply what's left." Another card game. Peyton couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice, his eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know you didn't sell any calves today," she said quietly. "You sold my grandmother's ring, and you tried to sell a copy of my wedding ring." Thomas's expression darkened. "Been talking to people, have you? Spreading our business around town?" "Deacon Porter saw you at Reese's store," Peyton replied, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. "How could you, Thomas? That ring was all I had left of my grandmother." "It was just sitting in that box doing nothing," Thomas shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "We needed the money for gambling, not for food, not for the mortgage, but for your cards and whiskey." Thomas stood so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. "I'm trying to give us a better life." "One big win, that's all it would take." "And how many one big wins have you chased in the last year?" Peyton demanded, backing away as he advanced toward her. "We're losing everything because of your gambling." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist painfully. "You think I don't know that? You think I want to live like this, scratching out a living on this worthless piece of land? We were doing fine until you started gambling away our savings," Peyton countered, trying to pull free. "Let go of me, Thomas." Instead, his grip tightened. "I don't answer to you. I'm the man of this house. You're hurting me," she whispered, fear replacing anger as she saw the unfamiliar darkness in his eyes. For a moment, Thomas seemed shocked by his own behavior. He released her wrist, stepping back. I wouldn't." He ran a hand over his face. "I need some air." He stumbled back outside, leaving Peyton shaking in the middle of their small cabin. She looked down at the red marks on her wrist, physical evidence of how far they'd fallen. This wasn't the man she'd married. That man had been kind, ambitious, full of dreams for their future together. This stranger was consumed by addiction and desperation. Peyton moved to the window, watching as Thomas climbed back onto the wagon and snapped the reins. He was heading back to town, back to the card tables that had become his true home. Once he was out of sight, Peyton made a decision. She couldn't continue this way. With quick, determined movements, she packed a small bag with essential items, a change of clothes, the little money she'd managed to hide from Thomas, a photograph of her parents. She hesitated at the bedroom door, looking back at the simple life she and Thomas had built together, now crumbling under the weight of his demons. Outside, the Texas night was cool and clear, stars speckling the vast sky above. Peyton knew the path to Deacon Porter's ranch by heart, though she'd never walked it alone before. It would take her most of the night, but she couldn't stay in that cabin waiting for Thomas to return, possibly angry and certainly more drunk than when he'd left. As she set out, her wedding ring caught the moonlight. Despite everything, she couldn't bring herself to remove it. Not yet. That final admission of defeat would have to wait. Several miles away, Deacon Porter sat on his porch, unable to sleep. His encounter with Peyton Nolan that afternoon had left him troubled. It wasn't his place to interfere in another man's marriage, but the thought of Peyton suffering at the hands of that drunk, gambling fool made his blood boil. Deacon had watched from afar as Thomas Nolan's vices had gradually taken over, as the once prosperous small ranch had begun to fail, as Peyton's smile had appeared less and less frequently. He'd wanted to help, but propriety kept him at a distance. A man didn't meddle in another man's affairs, especially when it came to his wife. But seeing Thomas sell what was clearly a treasured possession of Peyton's had crossed a line Deacon couldn't ignore. After leaving the Nolan place, he'd returned to town and entered Reese's general store with a purpose. "Afternoon, Mr. Porter," Jacob Reese greeted him. "Back so soon." "That ring Thomas Nolan brought in earlier," Deacon said without preamble. "I'd like to buy it." Reese raised his eyebrows. The wedding band, or the one with the small emerald, sold the emerald one already to Mrs. Harrington. She collects old jewelry. Deacon felt a pang of disappointment. The family heirloom was already gone. The wedding band then, how much? $15, Reese replied. It's a fine piece, good craftsmanship. Looks nearly identical to the one Mrs. Nolan wears. Deacon placed the money on the counter without hesitation. I'll take it. As Reese wrapped the ring in a small piece of cloth, he gave Deacon a knowing look. Don't mean to pry, but what's a bachelor like yourself want with a wedding band? Just righting a wrong, Deacon answered cryptically, pocketing the ring. Now, as he sat in the stillness of the night, that ring weighed heavy in his pocket. He wasn't entirely sure what he planned to do with it. Return it to Peyton somehow? Confront Thomas? Neither option seemed right. A movement in the distance caught his eye, a small figure making its way along the path toward his ranch. Deacon reached for his rifle, always cautious about nighttime visitors, but as the figure drew closer, recognition dawned. Peyton, he called out, setting the rifle aside and hurrying down the porch steps. She stopped at the sound of his voice, and even in the moonlight, he could see she'd been crying. She carried a small bag, and her hair had come loose from its usual tidy bun. I'm sorry, she said as he approached. I didn't know where else to go. What happened? Are you hurt? Deacon asked, noticing how she cradled her wrist. Thomas came home drunk. When I confronted him about the rings, She trailed off, unable to finish. Anger surged through Deacon. Did he hit you? No, but he grabbed me, hard, and the way he looked at me, her voice broke. I was afraid of what might happen when he came back from town. You did right coming here, Deacon assured her, gently taking her bag. Come inside, you're safe now. The Porter ranch house was larger than her cabin, well-built and comfortable without being extravagant. Deacon led her to the kitchen, lighting lamps as they went. Sit, he instructed, pulling out a chair. I'll make some coffee. Peyton sank gratefully into the chair, exhaustion washing over her. I shouldn't have come. It's not proper me being here alone with you. Proper be damned, Deacon replied, setting a kettle on the stove. I wasn't about to let you stay there with a man who'd hurt you. He's never done anything like that before, Peyton said quietly. At least not physically, but he's changed so much, Deacon, the gambling, the drinking. It's like he's become someone else entirely. Deacon nodded, understanding all too well. He'd seen it happen to men before, good men who lost themselves to the false promises of cards and whiskey. Addiction does that, changes a man from the inside out. I don't know what to do, Peyton admitted. I took vows, for better or worse, but how much worse am I supposed to endure? Deacon placed a cup of coffee in front of her, then sat across the table. Those vows go both ways. He promised to cherish and protect you, not sell your possessions and frighten you out of your own home. Peyton stared into her coffee, tears threatening again. I loved him once, I truly did. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the man I married, but they're becoming rarer. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her situation hanging between them. Finally, Deacon reached into his pocket. I have something for you, he said, placing the small cloth package on the table. Peyton looked at him quizzically, then unwrapped it. Her eyes widened as she recognized the ring. How did you? I went back to town after I left your place, Deacon explained. Thought you might want it back. Peyton picked up the ring, examining it closely. It's not actually my wedding ring. It's a copy Thomas had made. He knew I'd never willingly part with the real one. She shook her head, a sad smile touching her lips. He went to the trouble of having a fake made just to sell it while I still had the original on my finger. Seems like a lot of effort for a man who claims to be desperate, Deacon observed. He'd do anything for the cards, Peyton sighed. She tried to hand the ring back. You shouldn't have bought this. It's worthless to me. But Deacon closed her fingers around it. Keep it. Maybe it'll remind you that not all men would sell something so sacred. Their hands remained connected for a moment longer than necessary, and Peyton felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. She pulled away quickly, confusion and guilt washing over her. You can stay in the guest room, Deacon said, standing. No one will think anything improper. Mrs. Abernathy comes to help with the housekeeping in the mornings. She'll be here at dawn. Peyton nodded gratefully. Just for tonight, I need to figure out what to do next. As Deacon showed her to the guest room, Peyton felt both relief and apprehension. She was safe from Thomas's unpredictable behavior, but what would tomorrow bring? And why did Deacon Porter's kindness make her heart race in a way it hadn't in years? Morning came with the sound of roosters crowing and cattle lowing in the distance. Peyton woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the previous day's events came rushing back. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, ran her fingers through her tangled hair, and steeled herself to face the day. In the kitchen, she found a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s preparing breakfast. "You must be Mrs. Nolan," the woman said warmly. "I'm Martha Abernathy. Mr. Porter said you'd be staying with us for a spell." "Just last night," Peyton corrected, uncomfortable with the implication that she might be staying longer. "My husband and I had a disagreement." Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened with understanding. Men can be difficult creatures, especially when they've got the drink in them. "Mr. Porter's out checking the herd, but he left word that you're welcome as long as you need." Peyton helped with breakfast preparation, finding comfort in the familiar routine. By the time Deacon returned, she had fresh biscuits, eggs, and bacon waiting. "You didn't have to cook," he said, washing his hands at the pump outside before entering. "It's the least I could do after your hospitality," Peyton replied. They ate breakfast mostly in silence, Mrs. Abernathy filling the occasional gap with cheerful chatter about town gossip. When they'd finished, the older woman shooed them both out of the kitchen, insisting she'd handle the cleanup. "I should get back to my place," Peyton said as they stepped onto the porch. "Thomas will be wondering where I am, if he came home at all," Deacon pointed out. "Those card games can go on for days. All the more reason for me to check on things. The animals need tending." Deacon studied her face. "You're going back to him, aren't you?" Peyton sighed. "He's my husband, Deacon. I can't just abandon our life together because of one bad night." "It's not just one bad night, though, is it?" Deacon challenged gently. "It's been building for a long time, and now he's crossing lines he never crossed before." She couldn't argue with that. "What choice do I have? Women don't just leave their husbands in Presidio, Texas." "Some do," Deacon countered, "when there's good reason." "And then what? Live as an outcast, try to survive on my own in a world that's not kind to solitary women?" Peyton shook her head. "I made vows, Deacon. I have to at least try to honor them." Deacon looked like he wanted to argue further but thought better of it. "At least let me drive you back. It's a long walk." The ride to the Nolan homestead was tense, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they crested the final hill, they saw Thomas's wagon outside the cabin. "He's back," Peyton said unnecessarily, her heart racing with anxiety. "I'm coming in with you," Deacon stated, his tone brooking no argument. "That will only make things worse. I'm not leaving you alone with him until I know you're safe." They found Thomas passed out on the kitchen floor, an empty whiskey bottle beside him. The cabin was in disarray, chairs overturned, dishes broken, evidence of a drunken rage. "Looks like he came home in a state," Deacon observed grimly. Peyton knelt beside her husband, checking to make sure he was breathing. "He's out cold, probably will be for hours." Deacon surveyed the chaos. "Let me help you clean up before he wakes." Together they restored order to the cabin, working in companionable silence. Peyton couldn't help noticing how easily they moved around each other, anticipating needs without having to speak. It felt natural in a way that surprised her. As Deacon righted the last overturned chair, Thomas groaned, beginning to stir. "Peyton," he called groggily. She exchanged a quick glance with Deacon before approaching her husband. "I'm here, Thomas." Thomas struggled to sit up, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. When his gaze landed on Deacon, confusion gave way to anger. "What's he doing here?" "Mr. Porter was kind enough to bring me home," Peyton explained calmly. "Bring you home? Where were you?" Thomas demanded, using the table to pull himself to his feet. "I stayed at the Porter Ranch last night," Peyton said, lifting her chin. "After you left, I was afraid to stay here alone." Thomas's face darkened. "Afraid of what? Me?" His eyes narrowed as he looked between them. "Or was it just an excuse to spend the night with him?" "That's enough, Nolan," Deacon warned, stepping forward. "You're out of line." "I'm out of line," Thomas laughed bitterly. "You're in my house with my wife, and I'm out of line." "Nothing happened," Peyton insisted. "I slept in the guest room. Mrs. Abernathy was there, but Thomas wasn't listening." "I always knew you had your eye on her," he spat at Deacon. waiting for your chance to swoop in and play the hero. The only person causing problems in your marriage is you, Deacon replied evenly. Selling your wife's rings for gambling money, grabbing her hard enough to leave bruises, that's not how a man treats his wife. Thomas's gaze dropped to Peyton's wrist, where faint bruises had indeed formed. For a moment, shame crossed his face. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said quietly. I know, Peyton replied. But you did. And it wasn't just the bruises, Thomas. It was stealing my grandmother's ring. It was lying to me. It was choosing cards over our future. Thomas sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than his 30 years. I'll get the ring back, I promise. It's already been sold, Peyton told him, her voice tight with pain. It's gone. The news seemed to sober Thomas further. I'll make it right, Peyton. I swear I will. No more gambling. No more drinking. Peyton had heard these promises before, but never with such defeated sincerity. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could find their way back to the love they'd once shared. Deacon watched the exchange with mixed emotions. Part of him, a larger part than he cared to admit, hoped Peyton would leave Thomas for good, but he also knew that decision had to be hers alone. I should go, he said finally. Mrs. Nolan, if you need anything, she won't, Thomas interrupted, standing. I appreciate you looking after my wife, Porter, but I can take it from here. The challenge in his voice was clear, and Deacon had to resist the urge to respond in kind. Instead, he looked to Peyton. Is that what you want? Peyton hesitated, torn between the safety Deacon offered and the vows she'd made to Thomas. Yes, she decided at last. Thank you for everything, but I need to work things out with my husband. Deacon nodded, respecting her choice even as concern gnawed at him. Send word if you change your mind. He placed his hat on his head and left, the weight of the fake wedding ring still in his pocket serving as a reminder of the woman he was leaving behind. After Deacon's departure, an uncomfortable silence fell between Peyton and Thomas. Finally, Thomas broke it with a sigh. I was so worried when I came home and found you gone. You were too drunk to know I was gone, Peyton countered. Look at this place, Thomas. You destroyed it in a rage. I know, he admitted, shame coloring his features. When I saw you weren't here, I thought you'd left me for good, and I knew I'd deserve it. Peyton sat across from him, keeping the table between them. I almost did, I still might if things don't change. Thomas reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. I understand, he said, but I meant what I said, no more gambling. No more drinking, I'll be the man you married again. Words are easy, Thomas, you've made these promises before. This time is different, he insisted. Seeing those bruises on your wrist, knowing I caused them, his voice broke. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would hurt his wife. My father was that man, and I swore I'd never become him. The mention of his father, a notorious drunk who'd terrorized Thomas's mother until his death, gave Peyton pause. Thomas had never spoken much about his childhood, but she knew it had been difficult. One chance, she said finally. One last chance to prove you mean it. But if you gamble again, if you drink again, if you ever lay a hand on me in anger, I'm gone. Relief washed over Thomas's face. I won't let you down this time. I'll get work in town, save up to replace your grandmother's ring. It can't be replaced, Peyton said sadly, but you can try to rebuild my trust. That's what matters now. Thomas nodded earnestly. I'll start today. Sullivan at the livery was looking for help. It's not much pay, but it's honest work. Peyton wanted to believe him. Despite everything, a part of her still loved the man she'd married, still hoped he could find his way back from the brink. Go clean yourself up, she said. I'll make you something to eat, and then you can go see about that job. As Thomas headed to wash up, Peyton allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she making a mistake, giving him another chance? Or would this finally be the wake-up call he needed? Meanwhile, Deacon Porter returned to his ranch with a heavy heart. He'd done the right thing, leaving Peyton to work things out with her husband, but that didn't make it any easier. The image of those bruises on her wrist haunted him. Mr. Porter, Mrs. Abernathy greeted him as he entered. You're back sooner than I expected. Where's Mrs. Nolan? She decided to stay with her husband, Deacon replied, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. Mrs. Abernathy clucked her tongue. That Thomas Nolan never did deserve her, not even when they were courting. Always had an eye for the tables and bottles. Deacon raised an eyebrow. You knew him before they married? Oh yes, the whole town knew his reputation, but he put on a good face for Peyton's father, convinced everyone he'd changed. The older woman shook her head. Men like that don't change unless they hit rock bottom. Let's hope he's hit it then, Deacon said, though he doubted Thomas had fallen far enough yet to truly transform. For the next 2 weeks, Deacon kept his distance from the Nolan homestead, though he found reasons to ride past occasionally, assuring himself from afar that all seemed well. True to his word, Thomas appeared to be working at the livery stable in town, and Peyton was often seen tending to their small garden or the few remaining livestock. Then one evening, as Deacon was returning from town, he spotted Thomas stumbling out of the saloon, clearly drunk. A familiar anger rose within him, but he reminded himself it wasn't his place to interfere. Peyton had made her choice. As he rode past, however, he noticed Thomas climbing not into his own wagon but into one belonging to a known gambler, Silas Drake. The two men set off not toward the Nolan homestead but in the opposite direction, toward Drake's notorious private card game outside town. Deacon hesitated, torn between minding his own business and warning Peyton. Finally, conscience won out. He turned his horse toward the Nolan place, determined to at least let her know that Thomas had broken his promises. He found Peyton hanging laundry, her hair tied back with a ribbon, her face more peaceful than he'd seen it in months. She smiled when she saw him approach, a genuine smile that made his heart skip. "Deacon," she greeted him, "this is a surprise." "I was in town," he explained, dismounting. "Peyton, I saw Thomas at the saloon." Her smile faded. "You must be mistaken. Thomas has been working at the livery. He hasn't had a drink in 2 weeks." "I wish I were wrong," Deacon said gently, "but I saw him with my own eyes. He left with Silas Drake, heading toward that card game Drake runs out at his place." Peyton's face paled. "No, he promised. He swore he was done with all that." "I'm sorry," Deacon said, hating that he was the one bringing this news. "I thought you should know." Peyton's hands trembled as she unpinned a shirt from the line, folding it with mechanical movements. "I was so sure this time. He's been working hard, coming home sober every night, he even—" She paused, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small object. "He bought this for me yesterday." It was a simple silver locket, nowhere near as valuable as her grandmother's ring, but a token of affection nonetheless. "Said it was the first installment toward making things right," she continued, her voice breaking. "Maybe there's an explanation," Deacon offered, though he didn't believe it himself. Peyton shook her head. "No, deep down I knew it wouldn't last. I just wanted so badly to believe him." She looked up at Deacon, tears glistening in her eyes. "What kind of fool does that make me?" "Not a fool," Deacon said firmly. "A woman who honors her vows, a woman who sees the best in people even when they don't deserve it." Peyton wiped away a tear. "And now, what do I do now?" "That's for you to decide," Deacon told her. "But whatever you choose, you're not alone." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing despite both their efforts to ignore them. "I should finish the laundry," Peyton said, breaking the moment. "Thank you for telling me about Thomas." "What will you do when he comes home?" Deacon asked, concerned. Peyton straightened her shoulders. "I told him one more chance. He broke his word. I'll be gone before he returns." "Where will you go?" "My aunt lives in San Antonio. She's written several times asking me to visit." Peyton managed a small, sad smile. "I think it's time I took her up on that offer." Deacon nodded, respecting her decision. "If you need a ride to the station, thank you, but I can manage." "The Edwards are heading that way tomorrow with their wagon. Mrs. Edwards already offered me a seat." It was a sensible plan, and Deacon knew he should be glad she had a safe place to go. But the thought of Peyton leaving Presidio, leaving him, created an unexpected ache in his chest. "Will you come back?" he found himself asking. Peyton looked around at the small homestead she'd called home for 4 years. "I don't know, there's not much for me here anymore." "Except me," Deacon wanted to say, but it was too soon, too complicated. Peyton was still married, still processing the breakdown of her relationship with Thomas. The last thing she needed was another man declaring his feelings. "Whatever you decide, I hope you find happiness," he said instead. As he rode away, Deacon felt the weight of the fake wedding ring still in his pocket, a ring he'd bought to right a wrong but had never returned. Perhaps it was time to let it go, just as Peyton was letting go of her failed marriage. That evening, as Peyton packed her few belongings, she came across her wedding ring. She removed it slowly, placing it on the table where Thomas would find it. Beside it, she left a note explaining she was leaving for San Antonio and wouldn't be returning. She didn't mention Deacon's visit or what he'd told her about seeing Thomas at the saloon. Let Thomas wonder why she'd finally reached her breaking point. As darkness fell, Peyton found she couldn't stay in the cabin, surrounded by memories and broken promises. The Edwards weren't leaving until morning, but she couldn't bear to spend one more night waiting for Thomas to stumble home drunk. She decided to walk to town and spend the night at the small hotel there, even if it meant using most of her saved money. The night was clear, stars speckling the vast Texas sky as she made her way along the familiar road. The weight of her decision pressed on her heart, but beneath the sadness was a surprising sense of relief. For too long, she'd been trying to save a man who didn't want to be saved. Now she could focus on rebuilding her own life. Halfway to town, she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Stepping to the side of the road, she peered through the darkness, hoping it wasn't Thomas. Relief washed over her when she recognized Silas Drake's distinctive gray team. But as the wagon drew closer, she realized Thomas was indeed aboard, passed out in the back. Drake pulled up beside her. "Mrs. Nolan," he greeted her, tipping his hat, "was just bringing your husband home, afraid he had a bit too much excitement tonight. How much did he lose?" Peyton asked directly. Drake had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's between me and him, madam. Was it everything? Did he lose his job at the livery too?" Drake sighed. "Look, Mrs. Nolan, I don't want to get in the middle of your marital troubles, but your husband has a problem. He doesn't know when to walk away. Neither do you, Mr. Drake, or you wouldn't let a man like Thomas keep playing when he has nothing left to lose." "Fair point," Drake conceded. "For what it's worth, I tried to cut him off. That's when he offered up the deed to your place as collateral." Peyton's blood ran cold. "The deed, our home," Drake nodded grimly, "said it was in his name alone, that he could use it as he saw fit." It was true. The property had been Thomas's before they married. Legally, he could gamble it away if he chose to. Did he lose it? Peyton asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Not yet," Drake replied. "I told him I'd hold the deed until tomorrow. If he comes up with what he owes me by noon, he gets it back. If not," he shrugged, "business is business." Peyton stared at her unconscious husband, a surge of anger replacing her earlier sadness. "How much does he owe you?" $50. It might as well have been 5,000. There was no way Thomas could raise that kind of money by noon tomorrow, especially not with the reputation he'd cultivated around town. "I'll help you get him home," Drake offered. "No need," Peyton replied coldly. "He made his bed, let him lie in it. Right there in your wagon would be fine." Drake raised his eyebrows at her uncharacteristic harshness but didn't argue. "As you wish, madam. Though I should warn you, if he doesn't pay up by noon, you'll need to be off the property by sundown tomorrow. New owner's prerogative." "And who would the new owner be?" Peyton asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Me, initially," Drake replied, "though I might sell it on to someone else. I'm not much for ranching." Peyton nodded, a strange calm settling over her. "Good night, Mr. Drake." She continued her walk toward town, no longer sad but resolute. Thomas had gone too far this time. He hadn't just broken his promises or gambled away their savings, he'd risked their home, the roof over their heads. At the hotel, she spent a nearly sleepless night trying to formulate a plan. By morning, she knew what she had to do. The Nolan homestead wasn't worth much, but it was hers as much as Thomas's. She'd put 4 years of sweat and tears into that land. She wouldn't let it go without a fight. As dawn broke, Peyton made her way to the one person she knew might help Deacon Porter. Deacon was surprised to find Peyton at his door so early, her expression a mix of determination and desperation. "Thomas gambled away our home," she said without preamble, "to Silas Drake." "What?" Deacon ushered her inside. "When did this happen?" "Last night." "Drake is holding the deed until noon today. If Thomas doesn't come up with $50, we lose everything." Deacon ran a hand through his hair, processing this information. "Where's Thomas now?" "Passed out in Drake's wagon. Last I saw him, I left him there." The bitterness in her voice told Deacon just how deeply Thomas had betrayed her this time. "What do you need from me?" he asked, already knowing he'd give her whatever she asked for. "A loan," Peyton said simply. $50 to save the homestead. Once it's secure, I'll sell it properly and pay you back every cent. And Thomas, what about him? Peyton's eyes hardened. I'm done with Thomas. The papers I signed yesterday and left with Mr. Harrington in town make that clear. Deacon was taken aback. You filed for divorce. Yes, Peyton confirmed. Before I knew about the gambling, I was already planning to leave for San Antonio today. Deacon studied her face, seeing the pain but also the resolve. You don't need a loan, he said finally. I'll give you the $50. I can't accept that, Peyton objected. It's too much. Then consider it an investment, Deacon suggested. I've been looking to expand my ranch anyway. When you're ready to sell the homestead, sell it to me for a fair price. It was a practical solution, one that would benefit them both. Peyton considered it for a moment before nodding. That's agreeable, but I want everything legal and above board. No one can say I took advantage of your generosity. Of course, Deacon agreed, secretly admiring her integrity even in such dire circumstances. We'll have Harrington draw up the papers this morning before we meet with Drake. As they rode into town together, Deacon couldn't help wondering what this meant for them. Peyton was taking steps to end her marriage, yes, but that didn't necessarily mean she was ready for a new relationship, especially with a neighbor who'd been watching from the sidelines all this time. Will you still go to San Antonio? He asked as they approached the town's main street. I think I should, Peyton replied thoughtfully. I need time away from Presidio, from all the memories, time to figure out who I am without Thomas. Deacon nodded, understanding but disappointed. How long will you stay? I don't know. A few months at least. My aunt has offered me work in her dressmaking shop. It would be good to earn my own money, stand on my own feet for a while. They stopped outside Harrington's law office, where the older man was just unlocking the door for the day. Mrs. Nolan, he greeted her. I was reviewing your petition this morning. Are you certain about this course of action? More certain than ever, Peyton assured him. And we need another document drawn up as well. Mr. Porter is going to purchase my homestead. Harrington's eyebrows rose. I see, that was quick. It's not what you're thinking, Deacon interjected. There's been a complication with the property. Thomas gambled the deed to Silas Drake last night. Understanding dawned on Harrington's face. Ah, and you're stepping in to secure the property before Drake claims it. Wise move, considering the divorce proceedings. Within an hour, the necessary documents were prepared. Deacon agreed to purchase the Nolan homestead for a fair price, with payments to be made directly to Peyton over the course of a year. This would give her financial independence while she established herself in San Antonio. Their next stop was Drake's establishment, where they found the gambler counting the previous night's earnings. Thomas was nowhere to be seen. Mrs. Nolan, Drake said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you here. I've come about the deed to my property, Peyton stated firmly. I understand my husband used it as collateral last night. Drake glanced between her and Deacon. That's right, he has until noon to settle his debt. I'm settling it, Peyton declared, nodding to Deacon, who placed $50 on the table. Drake counted the money carefully, then reached into his desk drawer and retrieved the deed. Fair and square, he said, handing it to Peyton, though I doubt Thomas will see it that way when he sobers up. Thomas's opinion no longer concerns me, Peyton replied, taking the deed. Thank you, Mr. Drake. I trust our business is concluded. Indeed it is, madam. Drake tipped his hat. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Some men aren't worth the trouble they cause. Outside, Peyton handed the deed to Deacon. It's yours now. I hope it brings you more happiness than it brought me and Thomas. Deacon folded the document carefully. I'll take good care of it until you return from San Antonio. The offer stands if you want to come back to the homestead. It's yours. Peyton shook her head. No, that chapter of my life is closed, but thank you for saying so. They parted ways shortly after, Peyton to finish her preparations for the journey to San Antonio, Deacon to see to his ranch. The fake wedding ring still rested in his pocket, a reminder of the strange path that had led them to this point. As he rode home, Deacon made a decision. He would return the ring to Peyton before she left for San Antonio. Not as a romantic gesture, it was too soon for that, but as a symbol of closure, a way to put the past behind her. Later that afternoon, he arrived at the Edwards farm just as they were loading the wagon for their trip to San Antonio. Peyton was already there, her small bag packed, her face set with determination. "Deacon," she said, surprised to see him, "is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "I just wanted to give you something before you left." He held out the ring, wrapped in a handkerchief. "I bought this from Reese the day I saw Thomas trying to sell it. Thought you might want it back." Peyton unwrapped the handkerchief, staring at the ring with mixed emotions. "Why did you keep it all this time?" "Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do with it," Deacon admitted. "It seemed wrong to return it while you were still trying to make things work with Thomas. And after you decided to leave him, well, I thought it might be a painful reminder." "It is," Peyton acknowledged, "but it's also a reminder that someone cared enough to try to right a wrong." She closed her hand around the ring. "Thank you, Deacon, for this and for everything else." "Will you write?" he asked, trying to keep the hope from his voice. "Let me know how you're getting on in San Antonio." Peyton smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I will. And perhaps when I've had time to heal, to find myself again." She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. The promise hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. "I'll be here," Deacon said simply. As the Edwards wagon pulled away, Deacon watched until it disappeared over the horizon. The fake wedding ring now in Peyton's possession, not as a symbol of a failed marriage, but as the first tentative link in whatever might come next for them. Thomas Nolan sobered up to find his wife gone, his home sold, and divorce papers awaiting his signature. He railed against the injustice of it all, blaming Deacon Porter for stealing his wife and his property, but few in Presidio were sympathetic. Thomas had squandered too many chances, broken too many promises. Eventually, he signed the divorce papers and left town, heading west to try his luck in the silver mines of Arizona Territory. Some said he found success there, others that he gambled away whatever fortune he amassed. Either way, he never returned to Presidio. Meanwhile, Peyton flourished in San Antonio. Her aunt's dressmaking business gave her purpose and independence, and her letters to Deacon grew warmer, more personal with each passing month. They exchanged correspondence regularly, building a friendship founded on mutual respect and growing affection. 6 months after her departure, Peyton's divorce from Thomas was finalized. A week later, Deacon received a letter that made his heart race. "The spring flowers are blooming in San Antonio, but I find myself missing the wild beauty of Presidio. Perhaps it's time I came home to see if what I left behind is still waiting for me." Deacon's response was immediate. "Everything is just as you left it, only more certain of what it wants." 2 weeks later, Deacon stood on the platform of the Presidio station, watching as the train from San Antonio pulled in. Passengers began to disembark, and then he saw her, Peyton, more beautiful than he remembered, her smile brighter, her step more confident. "Welcome home," he said when she reached him. "Is it still home?" she asked. "Now that everything has changed," Deacon took her hand gently. "That depends on what you want it to be. And if I want it to be a new beginning, with you," the words he'd waited months to hear, "then I'd say you've come to exactly the right place." As they walked arm in arm toward his waiting wagon, Deacon noticed Peyton was wearing a necklace with a small gold band hanging from it, the fake wedding ring he'd returned to her before she left. "You kept it," he observed. "It reminded me that even in my darkest moment, there was someone who cared enough to try to make things right," Peyton explained. "Someone who saw value in something others thought worthless. Just like I saw in that small homestead," Deacon said with a smile. "Have you done anything with the property?" Peyton asked as they drove toward town. "Not yet. Been waiting to see what you wanted to do with it when you returned." He glanced at her. "It's still yours in my mind, always has been." The sun was setting as they reached the Porter Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Deacon had prepared a special dinner to welcome Peyton back, but as they stood on his porch, looking out over the land that stretched before them, food was the last thing on either of their minds. "I've thought about this moment every day since you left," Deacon confessed. "About what I'd say, what I'd do. And what did you decide?" Peyton asked, her eyes meeting his. "That I'd simply tell you the truth." That I've loved you from afar for years, that watching you suffer with Thomas broke my heart, and that having you here now feels like a miracle I don't deserve but will cherish every day if you'll let me." Tears glistened in Peyton's eyes. "I think I've loved you too in some way for longer than I realized. I just couldn't see it clearly until I stepped away from everything." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the beginning of something precious and new. When they finally pulled apart, Deacon rested his forehead against hers. "Take all the time you need," he told her. "I'm not going anywhere." But Peyton shook her head, smiling. "I've had 6 months of time, Deacon. 6 months of thinking, of healing, of discovering who I am on my own. I don't need more time, I need you." Their courtship was proper but swift. The people of Presidio, who had watched Peyton's suffering under Thomas's addiction and applauded her courage in leaving, were supportive of the new relationship. Even Mrs. Abernathy, ever the guardian of propriety, declared it about time those two found each other properly. 3 months after Peyton's return, they were married in a simple ceremony at the town's small church. Deacon had offered to sell the original Nolan homestead and buy property elsewhere, wanting Peyton to have a fresh start without painful memories, but she had refused. "That land is part of my story," she told him. "The hard parts and the good parts, I don't want to run from it. I want to transform it with you," and transform it they did. The struggling Nolan homestead became part of the thriving Porter ranch. The small cabin where Peyton had known such unhappiness was converted into a schoolhouse for the children of ranch workers. Where there had been scarcity and fear, now there was abundance and joy. On their first wedding anniversary, Deacon presented Peyton with a gift, a new wedding ring, more beautiful than her original but similar in design. "I know it can't replace your grandmother's ring," he said as he slipped it onto her finger. "But I wanted you to have something that was just ours, with no shadows from the past." Peyton admired the ring, then reached for the necklace. She still wore the one with the fake wedding ring Thomas had tried to sell. "I think it's time to let this go," she said, removing the necklace. "It served its purpose, bringing us together, but we don't need reminders of Thomas anymore." Together, they buried the fake ring under a young oak tree they'd planted when they married. "From something false, something true will grow," Deacon said, holding Peyton close as they padded down the earth. As the years passed, the Porter Ranch prospered. Deacon's fair treatment of his workers and Peyton's community involvement made them respected figures in Presidio. Their family grew with the birth of twins, a boy and a girl, followed 2 years later by another son. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, surrounded by love and stability. Occasionally, news of Thomas Nolan would reach them. He'd struck silver in Arizona, lost it all in California, then headed to Alaska during the gold rush. Always chasing the next big win, never finding lasting happiness, Peyton received these updates with a detached sympathy. "I hope he finds peace someday," she would say, before turning back to her own full life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Deacon turned to Peyton. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About how things turned out?" Peyton considered the question, thinking back to the frightened, heartbroken woman she'd been, fleeing her homestead in the dark. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every step of that difficult path led me here to you, to this life we've built together." Deacon took her hand, running his thumb over the wedding ring he'd given her. "I used to think it was just chance, me seeing Thomas trying to sell that ring, deciding to buy it back. But now I think it was something more, like we were meant to find each other, even through all the pain." "Some would call that fate," Peyton said with a smile. "I call it the best kind of luck," Deacon replied, pulling her close. The oak tree where they'd buried the fake wedding ring had grown tall and strong, its branches spreading wide to provide shade for their children's play. Like that tree, their love had put down deep roots, weathering storms and seasons, becoming something enduring and beautiful. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, Peyton found herself remembering the woman she'd once been afraid and trapped in a failing marriage, it only made her more grateful for the journey that had brought her here. To this man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, who had bought back a worthless ring, and in doing so had helped her find a priceless love. In the years that followed, the story of how Deacon Porter had seen Thomas Nolan sell a fake wedding ring, bought it back, and returned it to Peyton became something of a local legend in Presidio. Young couples would visit the oak tree on the Porter Ranch, now massive and majestic, and make wishes for a love as true and enduring as Deacon and Peyton's. Their children grew up strong and principled, carrying forward the values their parents had instilled in them. Their eldest son took over management of the ranch when Deacon's knees began to trouble him, while their daughter became the town's first female doctor, treating patients in a clinic built on the very spot where the Nolan cabin had once stood. In their twilight years, Deacon and Peyton would often sit together on their porch, hands intertwined, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky. "Do you remember?" Deacon would ask. "That day I came to tell you I'd seen Thomas at the saloon. How could I forget?" Peyton would reply. "It was the day I finally found the courage to leave. I was so afraid of overstepping, of seeming like I was trying to come between a husband and wife." Peyton would squeeze his hand then. "Instead, you helped me see what I already knew in my heart, that some vows, once broken beyond repair, need to be released." Their love story, born from the ashes of a failed marriage, became a testament to second chances and the unexpected ways that happiness can find us, even in our darkest moments. And at its heart was a simple act of kindness. A cowboy who saw a woman's husband sell her wedding ring, bought it back, and returned it in secret, never imagining that this small gesture would change both their lives forever. As the oak tree continued to grow, its roots intertwining beneath the soil where the fake ring lay buried, it stood as a living symbol of how something authentic and lasting can grow from even the most deceptive beginnings, much like the love that had flourished between Deacon and Peyton. A love that had started with a counterfeit ring, but had proven itself more genuine than either could have imagined. And in the end, when asked about the secret to their long and happy marriage, Deacon would always say the same thing. "I saw her worth when others didn't, and she saw the best in me even when I doubted myself. Everything else, all the trials and joys that came after, was built on that foundation." To which Peyton would always add, with a smile that still lit up her eyes after all these years, "And it didn't hurt that he was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to return a ring he thought was precious to me. Any man who would do that is worth keeping forever."